So for today's video, I'm going to be talking about the topic the Pgl Major 2017, which is coming up next week. And for this video, I'm essentially just going to kind of break down all the teams in the major and kind of talk about my expectations for that team and kind of what I think they'll be able to do in this event. So I'm going to start it off with the legends, and of course, the first legend that I'm going to be talking about is Astralis. So Astralis is one of the best teams in the world. There's no doubt about it. They are a top four team, and they have all the tools in the world necessary to win their second major in a row. Now, Astralis is in a position where I think, since they didn't go to Cologne and, their last event was kind of the ECS playoffs, they are at a point where uh, I'm kind of unsure about how good they are as a team. I mean, I think that the ECS season 3 finals was actually like a pretty good like showing of how good some of these teams were going forward. Um, but I think honestly from the takeaway of that event and from the takeaway of the past couple events leading up to this major, I think SK is the best team in the world. So I think going into this major, Astralis may not actually feel like they're the best team in this major. I actually think Astralis have something to prove again uh, at in Krakow in Poland. Um, but Astralis, obviously, they're a very good team. They have the best in-game leader in the world, without a doubt in my mind, in Glaive. They have Device, who is one of the best operas in the world, and really just actually like one of the best like just general players in the world when he shows up. And that's one of the main problems is actually that he doesn't always show up for major tournaments. He doesn't always show up in matches. He didn't show up for every match in that major, or the E League major, excuse me, against Virtus Pro. It was actually Kierby, who is a very good player, who actually showed up a lot, and Zipnix, who um, showed up a lot in those finals. And Zipnix had like crazy clutches and things like that. I remember especially on a map on Inferno, I believe it was, where he had like a couple of good clutches and like some really sick plays on CT, like on that boost, kind of on B site. He made like a crazy play. I remember, I think it was a 3K. Um, but he has like these sick plays to kind of help them win this major. And Device, again, like doesn't show up completely, but the fact that Device didn't have to show up for them to win a major is why they're now regarded as like the best team in the world essentially, or a top 2 or top 3 team in the world, and like they're just so dangerous as a team because Glaive is such a good in-game leader that they don't need everyone to show up, and that they can get a performance from anyone on that team. I mean, even Glaive himself has put up like decent fragging numbers in some matches against like big time opponents. So, overall for Astralis, I think a top 4 is like certainly like, I mean, I think for them a goal is to win it, obviously, because they're a top 4 team in the world. But I think anything less than top 4 is a failure by all means. So the next team is Virtus Pro. And Virtus Pro is a team where we have literally seen nothing from them, and like basically since the major, where they were obviously like one of the top teams in the world. And we saw them at the Clash for Cash against Astralis, and they did win a map, but they like didn't look very impressive, and they definitely didn't look impressive on the other 2 maps they didn't win. They kind of just got rolled. And so for Virtus Pro, I think they're a team right now that's like kind of struggling, and they're really not at the point that they want to be going into this major. And I don't know really what to expect from them completely, to be honest with you. Uh, but I think I'm gonna predict that I think they'll make playoffs. I think they'll secure a spot again at in the next major. But I actually wouldn't be completely surprised if this is one of those teams that doesn't make it out of the group stage, that they just fall flat. They lose to, like a Flip Side, or they lose to like Mouse Sports maybe, or even Cloud9, obviously. Like 3 teams that could easily beat them, like Gambit maybe could beat them. There's like every team in this major, like you think, wow, like they could beat Virtus Pro, and I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. Like Virtus Pro is a team where we think so highly of them, and we're like, well, yeah, but they could make top 4, they could make the finals even if they're playing just unbelievable. But at the same time, you're like, but like they could have like a bad event, like we've seen from them at Clash for Cash, and they might not even beat Vega Squadron. Like they might just lose out like 0-3 in Swiss maybe, which would just be crazy. And I believe it was Pasha Biceps who said in an article on HLTV, like, if things don't get better, we might make a team change, which is just crazy to think about because of how long this Virtus Pro team has actually been, like, just this five. Um, so, I think for them, I think top four is probably the goal. I think a top four finish is, like, well earned and good for them. Uh, but I think it wouldn't be, again, completely surprising to see them not even make it out of playoffs. So the next team is Fnatic that I'm going to talk about. And Fnatic is a team where we have seen some very good stuff from them. I mean, obviously, at the DreamHack event, I believe it was, they played SK and they looked like just really good. And they looked like they had a chance to actually like go on and win the event against SK because, Fnatic has always been a team where like they haven't necessarily had always like the best strategy or always the best like defaults and things like that. Oh, excuse me, but they've had like very good like in-game leaders, and they've had very or not very good in leaders. Excuse me, they've had very good performances from like all their players, including the in-game leaders of whoever that was at that time, or like all of their players are players who can put up like really good numbers against like a team of any quality, which is why they are like a dangerous team. Like Fnatic is one of those teams where I think Fnatic will make it into playoffs, but I think Fnatic is one of those teams where they could beat G2 in a best of three. They could beat, probably any team in a best of three outside of maybe Astralis. I think Astralis has the edge on them just because Astralis is so well structured and they don't give anything. They don't make any mistakes, which is why they're so good. Like SK is a team that makes some mistakes, but they are just so good individually again, like Fnatic is, where they can just win, which is why we saw Fnatic and SK like do an absolute like just have an absolute war in that finals matchup because those are two teams who just they like go into the server and they think that they can kill everyone. And both teams think that way, and both teams like have, they think that they have like decent strategy but unbelievable skill individually, and both teams do, which is why like you see them just kind of clash onto a site, and it's just a battle because you never know. And then like we saw Olafmeister get a 1v3 clutch, and we've seen, Cold Sarah get clutches and things like that all the time, and it's, because they just have insane skill individually, and they're just insane like really good, insane individual players. So, so for Fnatic, a top four finish again with Virtus Pro is I think what they should expect or what their goal is. But this is a team that could easily get into a semifinal against G2 or get into a semifinal against SK or FaZe and beat them and make it to the final. I think, I guess depending on how the bracket turns out, even win the final, which would be unbelievable. And that would certainly be like a bold prediction to most degrees, but I think it's not completely impossible that that's something that could happen. So the next team is SK, who I mean, right now they are the best team in the world in my opinion, and they are the team that I'm actually going to predict to win the major. I think SK right now they've found their old like ceiling of 2016 when they were the best team in the world, but I think they're doing it in a much different way and a much more structured way, but they are still the same like dominant like, fraggers. Like Cold Zera is still the best player in the world. Fallen is still an incredible opper, and Fur is still like a really good aggressive player. Phelps, who they brought on, has like shown that he could be like a really good like third or fourth best player at some points, and even has that potential to be like the second best player on that team at some point. And then you know Taco again, and like another player who's like a really good like third or fourth player. Like they have five players who could be like the third or second or even first best player on their team, but they're all like on the same team and it all works, which is just why they're so good, right? So SK again, I think that their goal should be to win the major. I think that they could and should win the major. I think they are the best team going into it, and I think they have the highest chance of winning the major. I don't see a way in which SK doesn't make it to top four. I don't think there's any team outside of G2, Fnatic, Astralis, and FaZe that could beat them, and I don't even think all those teams will beat them. Like again, obviously, like I think SK is going to win the whole thing, but like I think there's a world in which FaZe could beat them. There's a world in which G2 could beat them. there's a world in which Astralis could beat them. There's a world in which Fnatic could potentially beat them. But like when it actually comes down to it, like I just don't think it will happen. Like I think SK is too good and they want this major too bad. They want to show that they're the best team again and they want to like, kind of like regain this era of uncertainty, like which most people have been calling it. Um, and kind of take away the Astralis era before it really begins. So the next team is Navi, and Navi is another team like Virtus Pro where I don't really know what to expect from them. I think Navi could go on and win, uh, not the whole event. I think they could make it out of playoffs, and I think they could, again, based on how the bracket turns out, maybe make top four. Like if they get into a situation where they play like Virtus Pro for top four, or maybe even like Fnatic for top four, or we don't know who the top 8 teams would be, but like, obviously like if something crazy happens where like Flipside makes it out or something like that, like you could see them, making top four. But I don't think they'll make anything closer to top. I don't think they'll make anything past top four, and I would think that their goal for this event is to just requalify for the next major. I think they've got some figuring out to do still with this team. It's been a very long time for them to try to figure it out, but I think that they just need to figure it out. But if they do figure it out, I think they could be a top 5 team in the world again. I think Simple is way too good of a player to not like be on a top 5 team in the world, and I think he kind of demands the excellence from them, and I think they certainly could. So the next team is going to be Gambit, and Gambit is a team where they're another team that we haven't seen a lot out of, but I think Gambit has kind of upset potential on most of these top teams. Like, and I think they have more than I would say like Flipside or Vega Squadron or Immortals or Penta or Big. I think they have like much more upset potential than those teams. Um, but to be honest with you, I don't think Gambit will actually requalify for the major through this. Like, I don't know if I don't think I see Gambit making top 8. Like I think Gambit's a team that again like they could beat some of the good teams, but I don't see a top 8 finish for Gambit at this. And I think the goal for them should be to make top 8. I think if they make playoffs and they secure their spot for another major, I think that's like good enough for them, and I think that's something that they can kind of pride themselves on moving forward. But again, I don't see a lot from them uh, going into this major. And now the next team is North, who have all the players. Like on paper, North is like a top 5 team in the world for sure, but they've just not been able to get it together, and I'm not really sure why. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like I think MSL is like a pretty decent in-game leader. I think Magisk is like kind of underrated by most analysts. Like I actually think Magisk is like probably like a top 6, maybe top 8 player in the world right now. Like obviously we saw his performance against Virtus Pro on Cobblestone. Like everybody knows about that. Like that was unbelievable. But I think he can have more performances that are like closer to that than people think. Like I think that he can be at some points like he could be a hard carry for North like he was in that event. But I think they actually don't use him as much as they should. Uh, but Cajun B is obviously like a really good player. AZ is a really good player. Config is obviously like a really good player. Like again, like this is a team that on paper has 4 players that can consistently put up like really good numbers and consistently be like the second or first best player on their individual teams. And then they have MSL who's like a really good in-game leader, but they just don't have it. Like there's something that they're missing that they just can't put it together. And I'm not sure what it is. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to find it before they have to make a team change. But if they do, this is a team that very easily could be a top 4 team in the world, in my opinion. So for them at this major, I think they should expect, or I think the goal is a top 4 finish. I think making it into playoffs is what will happen. Um, but I don't know if they'll be good enough to go anything past top 4. Like I don't see them beating Astralis or SK or FaZe or Fnatic even, or G2 like in a best of 3. Um, but I think that there's certainly a possibility of top 4. I think that's definitely the goal, and I think that's certainly a possibility. So the last the last legend team to talk about is FaZe. Now FaZe Clan is a team that I would consider to be like fairly inconsistent, but not like to like a bad degree. Like their low is still like pretty good, and their high is like insane. Like their low is obviously like since this team formed, like they've made the finals of like every tournament except for obviously Cologne 2017 that they've been a part of. And I think their low, like they could be like their low at this event is top 4, I think. Like if they make it top 4, like that's like good for them, but that's not what they want. Like they want to win the major, and that certainly should be their goal, and that is their goal. But I'm not sure uh like what to expect from them. Like obviously like they had a really like rough series against SK at Cologne, which, was kind of showing of I guess more of how good SK is in my opinion, than how bad or like how inconsistent FaZe may be. But I think FaZe is a team that could beat Astralis. They could beat G2. I mean, I even think we've seen them beat SK. Like they could beat SK. If they show up a little bit more to the server, I mean, like obviously, like on that cash match, like Rain was insane. Like, and if they get any help, if Rain gets any help, or Nico like plays to his actual level and doesn't underperform, like FaZe easily win cash, and who knows what happens on that game 3? Like it's all hypothetical, so we can't really say. But I think they can certainly show, or like they certainly have the ability to win um, this major. I just don't think they will. I think that top 4 is where they'll end, and I think top 4 is like decent, but that doesn't meet their expectations by any means. I would say. So now on to the challenger teams. The first one is Mouse Sports. And Mouse Sports is a team who, for me, at this major, they're an upset team. And like what I mean by that is like they are a team that could make top 8. Uh, they'll make the playoffs, I think, in my opinion, and they're a team that could beat like a really good team. Like Mouse Sports, like in a world, I could see them beat North. In a world, I could see them beat Virtus Pro, maybe even FaZe or G2. But I think to say they could beat Astralis or SK, I think is a little far fetched. I think Astralis and SK are too good, and play too consistently well to lose to Mouse Sports. But I think the goal for Mouse Sports should certainly be to make playoffs. Like playoffs is the goal for them, and top 4 is not completely out of their reach depending on how the bracket plays out. But I think Rops has consistently gotten better as a player, or Ropes, however you say it. And then I think Oscar, we've seen like incredible stuff from him, especially at the qualifier. Like he was sick at the qualifier, and he's like a really good player, and can be like almost a hard carry for this team. And now that Ropes is starting to get it together, like they'll be a very good team, with a lot of potential to go deep, like top 4 in this tournament, like I said before. So the next team is G2. Now, G2 is one of the top 4 teams in the world, in my opinion. And it's funny because, like, I would call them a top 4 team, but, like, we haven't really seen them at peak performance outside of one event. And at that event, like, sure, there were decent teams. I mean, like, they played North, who's, like, a pretty good team. And they played, like, some other good teams at the um, ESL finals. Or the ESL Pro League finals, excuse me. But like, I don't know how. Again, like we haven't seen that play style work consistently for them yet, and so going into this major, like I actually have no idea how good they're going to be or if they could win this event. Like I think they're a top 4 team for sure, but they could easily lose to like half of the teams in this major that you wouldn't expect them to lose to, just because their style is so inconsistent. But like at the same time, they could like come out and they could kill like frag incredibly well, and they could have their system and their style just work for them, and they could like beat any team in the entire tournament in a 2-0 fashion. Like they could beat Astralis 2-0 if they showed up like crazy good. Like their ceiling, like if they hit their ceiling, like they could beat any team in the world 2-0 in a best of 3. So for them, I think top 4 is the goal. Well, I think like their own goal is to probably win the major, but I'm gonna say for all intents and purposes that their goal is to make top 4, and certainly to not have to qualify for the major again, which I think there's no situation where they don't make it out of playoffs or make it out of the Swiss system, excuse me, and make it into playoffs. So the next team is Big. Now, Big is a team who I'm going to put them kind of in the list with Gambit, where they are an upset team, and Mouse Sports as well, where they're upset teams that could make top eight. But like for Big, I think it's a little bit more far fetched that this team would make top eight. Um, I think Big has like the good structure. Like God B is like a very good in-game leader, and they have the structure to be able to make like a top four or not a top four, excuse me, like a top eight finish, and make it out of playoffs and like secure their spot for the next major. But I think it's going to be very hard for them, especially depending on how these other upset teams do. Like if they get to like 1 and 2 and they end up playing like a Fnatic or something, or if they make it to like 2-1 even, or 2-2, and they have a decider against like Cloud9, or they have a decider against like North or something like that. Like I don't think that they'll win a match like that, like a match that's so high pressure, in that sense that I don't think that they'll make top eight. I think the goal for them is top eight. I think that it's certainly a possibility that they don't make top eight though, and I think they'd have to have like a really good performance from their team to be able to make it out into top eight. So the next team is Cloud9. Now Cloud9, I actually just made a video about them that'll be posted most likely before this, about like the video was about the NA teams, like the top NA teams, and how like if they have a chance to win like upcoming majors. And Cloud9, of course, is the only NA team at this major coming up next week. And so basically, what I said in the other video, and I'm basically just gonna restate it here. SK or Cloud9 is a team that if they like can play at their ceiling consistently, very similar to G2. Like they can be a top 5 team in the world. Like their ceiling is top 5 versus G2's, whose is top 1, like the best team in the world. But Cloud9, I think, could very easily make top 4 at this event. Again, like everything is dependent on the bracket, of course, and this is all speculation. But Cloud9, like if they get into top 8, if they make it out and they're in playoffs and they play like like North, or if they play Navi or Fnatic or Mouse or G2, maybe even, like they could win if G2's like kind of like that lower tier G2 that we've kind of seen. Like Cloud9 could beat them in a best of 3, I think. Um, but I don't know. Like I don't think finals is a possibility for them. Like I don't think when they get to the semifinals, like any team they play at the semifinals is either going to be like Astralis or Fnatic or SK or FaZe or G2. And if those teams are making it to the semifinals, like they're playing really well, or they're playing well enough to be like a top 4 team in the world. And I don't think Cloud9 has it. Like even at their ceiling, like I don't see them beating Fnatic in a best of 3 if Fnatic's at their top, at their ceiling, playing like unbelievable, like they did against SK in the finals, like 3 weeks ago. So for me, Cloud9 is a team that top 4 should probably be the goal, but certainly like above everything else, qualify for the next major. Like make it out of the Swiss system and get into playoffs. Like I think that should be their actual like goal. Like they absolutely should be able to make top 8 and make it into playoffs. And I think if they make top 4, like that's a really good performance from them. And that's like a really good, like well done, like pats on the back to all those players if they can make it top 4. And move on, to the next major, like with a spot. And then so kind of the last 4 teams I'm going to go through kind of quicker because this video is already kind of getting long. Penta, overall, I think Penta's a team that I don't really see making it out of group stage. They're just an upset team in my opinion, who could cause some upsets, maybe make top 8, but honestly, like I don't see them beating any good team here in like a situation where they have to qualify. Like I don't see them beating Cloud9 or G2 or Navi or North or FaZe or any of those, like obviously like all the top teams, like if they are in a situation where they have to qualify. So overall, I think if they make top 8, like that's really good for them. But like I think them just making the major was like already like a good step for them and like already like a really good performance on their part. So next team is Immortals. Immortals is another team like that. I think Immortals has a higher ceiling than Penta. Like we've seen like Immortals be like crazy good sometimes, and I think Immortals like easily could make top 8. Well, not easily, but like I could easily see them like being a top 8 team, and it wouldn't surprise me. But I think Immortals is a kind of team where you're not always going to get the most consistent play from them, which is actually why they haven't made majors before now. But I think if they do make this major and if they do show up, then they will, make top 8. I don't see them making top 4. Like I don't see them beating like again any of the good teams. Very similar to like I said with Penta. Um, but I think top 8 is very good for them, and if they can automatically qualify for the next major, like that's really sick, and that's really good play for them on their part. And then the last two teams are Vega Squadron and Flipside. And Vega Squadron is a team where I don't really expect anything from them. Like they could win, they could beat, like they could upset some teams. Like they could take a game off Cloud9 maybe, or like take a game off of Mouse Sports, or but they're like for me, like they're a team that could upset the teams that are looking to make upsets. Like it's kind of weird. Like I think Vega Squadron is like by far like the lowest tier team coming into this event. Uh, but like I could see them beating Penta, like I could see them beating Big, like I could see them beating Immortals, like the other like lower tier teams, like they could certainly beat. And if they like get really lucky, like obviously again, like everything is based on bracket, but like if they like play three like shittier teams, like if they play like three like low tier like Big, like if they play like Big, Immortals, Penta, and they win all three of those and they make top 8, like that's one of those things where it's like good for you, like you didn't really play anybody good, but you just secured your spot in the next major. So like like congrats to you, but again, like I don't see anything like crazy happening for Vegas Squadron. And then flip side, there's a world where they make top 8. Certainly, I think that they could beat uh like a lot of these teams. Like I could see Flipside beating North. I could see Flipside beating Virtus Pro. I could see them beating Navi, Gambit, FaZe, Cloud9. Uh, I think there's certainly a way that Flipside could be a top 8 team and qualify for the next major. But I think over that, like, other than that, like, I think top 8 is kind of their ceiling at this event. Like, if they make top 4, that would be unbelievable for them. Like, I don't see a way in which they make top 4. Uh, because like once you get to top 8, like if you're playing any good team, like I mean, I guess here's the thing, like if they play North again top 8, like if they beat North earlier or something like that, or like if they get into playoffs and they play North or Navi or Gambit or something like that, like they could beat those teams and they could make top 4, sure. But I don't, like it's obviously it's like it's all hard. It's hard to say because you don't know what the bracket's going to look like until it happens. So like for me, Flipside is a team that could easily make top 8 and make top 4 if they play like a lower like top tier team, like I said, like North or Virtus Pro. Um, but I think more than anything, they're just like a really big upset team. Like they could be a team that like they're playing like a qualifying match, like they're 2-2 and they're playing a qualifying match against like Virtus Pro and they beat Virtus Pro, or like North or Gambit or Navi, like all the teams I said they could upset. So overall, I think we're in for like a really good major. Like I think this major could have like a lot of upsets, and we could see like a lot of crazy things happen at this major. And I think it's still really hard to call who's going to win it. But again, like I said, I'm actually going to predict that SK is going to win the major. I think SK is the clear-cut number one team right now going into it, um, just because of the performances we've seen from them at like the last couple of lanes that they've attended. And like I said, I think we're in for a great major, and I think it's going to be an incredible performance from all these teams. And I hope that we just get like a lot of incredible and memorable matches going forward.